My name is Marlene Whitaker. I'm 52 years old, a public high school counselor in Richmond, Virginia. I've spent nearly 3 decades helping teenagers plan their futures, navigate heartbreaks, and rise above the noise. I never expected I'd be the one blindsided by betrayal, especially not from my own blood. But that's exactly what happened. The bank said I owed $823,000 on a mortgage I never signed. My credit score tanked overnight. My name was on 3 credit cards I'd never touched, and a second mortgage I couldn't even afford in dreams. And the house, it belonged to my younger sister, who smiled at me across the dinner table, as if she hadn't just detonated my entire life. I still remember the moment it started, a Wednesday. I was grading essays in my office after school. My phone buzzed with a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something in my gut made me hit play. Good afternoon, Mrs. Whitaker. This is Douglas from Eastwood Financial. We're following up about your missed payments on the mortgage for the Hemlock Trail property. We've sent several notices. Please call us back immediately to avoid foreclosure proceedings. Hemlock Trail. What in God's name was Hemlock Trail? I sat frozen, phone still in hand. There had to be a mistake. I hadn't applied for a mortgage, certainly not recently. And the only house I owned was the modest 2-bedroom I'd lived in for 20 years. Paid off, simple, quiet. I called the number back. A man answered, polite but hurried. Mrs. Whitaker, thanks for returning the call. I understand this must be stressful. We've reviewed the account. You're listed as the sole mortgage holder for a property purchased 6 months ago. Loan amount $823,000. It appears you haven't made a payment since April, I laughed. Not out of humor, out of disbelief. I think you've got the wrong Whitaker, I said. I didn't buy a property. I don't owe you a penny, he paused. The kind of pause that makes your stomach twist. Well, ma'am, we have all the documentation on file. Signed application, income, verification, tax returns, your social security number. Your signature is on the loan documents. Would you like me to send you a scanned copy? I heard him speaking, but my mind was racing. How could this be? I hadn't shared my tax documents with anyone except Savannah, my sister. Even thinking it felt like a betrayal. I didn't sign anything, I repeated slower this time. And I definitely didn't authorize a loan for $800,000. Understood, he said, a practiced patience in his voice. Then I recommend coming to the branch as soon as possible. We can go over the documents together. I ended the call, my fingers ice cold. Something was wrong. Not just wrong, calculated. Precise. Personal. That night I couldn't sleep. I pulled out my old tax returns, my social security documents. I started Googling the address Hemlock Trail, Charlottesville. And there it was. A colonial-style home, pristine, white siding, wrap-around porch, manicured lawn. I'd seen it before on Savannah's Instagram stories. I remembered the caption, dreams come true. Manifest. Work hard. You deserve luxury. Back then I thought she'd made a lucky sale, maybe closed a big deal. Now I knew better. My sister used my name to buy her dream house. She forged my documents. And while I was living a quiet life, clipping coupons and planting rosemary, she was sipping champagne in a house I was unknowingly paying for. And she thought I wouldn't find out. She thought I would stay silent like I always did. She was wrong. Because at Sunday dinner, as she passed me a slice of tiramisu with a smile, I slid the police report across the table. No drama, no raised voice, just a quiet reckoning. And it all began with one voicemail. After the call ended, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and a cheap ballpoint pen, trying to piece together what had just happened. I listed every possible explanation I could think of. The first was human error. Maybe the bank had filed the paperwork under the wrong name. Maybe there was another Marlene Whitaker out there, though that seemed unlikely in a mortgage that large. I called my accountant, Greg Whitlow, the next morning. He'd been managing my taxes for 12 years. I asked him as calmly as I could if he'd submitted any recent financial applications on my behalf. Loan verifications, income statements, anything that might have slipped through the cracks. No, Marlene. He said, his tone gentle, careful. I would never release your information without your signature, and you know that. I did. Greg was meticulous. If there had been a mistake, it wasn't his. That left only one other possibility: identity theft. Just saying the words to myself felt surreal. Like I was an extra in a movie about other people's problems, people who clicked on scam emails or lost their wallets on public buses. Not someone like me. I didn't shop online. I froze my credit during the Equifax breach. I shredded my mail religiously, so how I opened my filing cabinet and dug out every document I'd kept over the last 5 years. Tax forms, pay stubs, W-2s, health insurance paperwork, everything with my social security number on it. I kept them locked away in a manila folder labeled "Personal Do Not Touch," as if that label alone had the power to protect me. And yet, here I was trying to trace breadcrumbs back to whoever had blown a hole through my financial life. I called Eastwood Financial again and requested copies of the mortgage application. The clerk on the phone emailed them to me within the hour. When I opened the PDF, I nearly dropped my laptop. There it was. My name, my address, my social, my employer, even my gross income, though oddly inflated to nearly double my actual salary, and a signature at the bottom of each page that looked eerily similar to mine. Similar, but not mine. There were subtle differences, only I would notice the angle of the W in Whitaker, the way my real signature always dipped slightly when I wrote the R, how I never looped my lowercase l. Whoever had forged it had tried hard, painstakingly hard, but they'd missed the nuances. My stomach churned. I kept looking, scanning for anything that could offer a clue. And that's when I saw the email address linked to the online mortgage application, Marlene Whitaker, va@gmail.com. My email is marlenewhitaker1970@gmail.com. Close enough to fool a clerk. Far enough to raise alarm bells in my gut. Who would have that level of detail about me? I thought about former coworkers, neighbors, students' parents. But the list narrowed fast. No one knew my income except Greg. No one knew my social security number either, except Savannah. She'd asked for it 2 years ago. I remembered it vividly now. She claimed she needed a co-signer for a rental property she was helping a client secure. It wasn't unusual, she worked in real estate, and she'd asked in a way that seemed casual. "It's just for background verification," she said over coffee one day, brushing it off like it was nothing. I gave it to her, trusting she knew what she was doing, trusting that she wouldn't use it for anything else. Now I felt like a fool. A deep, icy numbness settled over me, not quite rage, not quite panic. Just the cold realization that I'd been careless with my trust, and the person I'd handed that trust to might have sold it for marble countertops and a 3-car garage. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. It wasn't a stranger. It was her. It had to be. No one else had the access. No one else knew the shape of my life that well. No one else had everything they needed to become me. And suddenly I wasn't wondering if Savannah did it. I was wondering how long she thought she could get away with it. That night I didn't sleep. I didn't even try. The weight of what I'd discovered sat on my chest like a cinder block. My house, usually a refuge of silence and order, suddenly felt like a stranger's place, familiar yet off-kilter. I walked barefoot across the hardwood floors, not turning on the lights. I didn't need them. I knew where everything was, or at least I thought I did. I brewed a pot of chamomile tea, left it untouched on the counter, and pulled out the cardboard box I kept stashed in the hall closet. It was labeled housing and loans. It hadn't been opened in nearly a decade, but tonight I needed to know every address, every bank name, every financial agreement I'd ever touched. I needed to prove to myself, if no one else, that I hadn't gone mad, that I didn't sign that mortgage, that this life implosion wasn't some buried error on my part. I sat cross-legged in the living room, stacks of paper fanned around me like a fortress. Every mortgage statement from the house I'd paid off 15 years ago, the deed, the final loan payment receipt, the tax clearance, all in order, all real, all mine. I looked through envelopes with my name printed neatly on the front, most from years past, some yellowed and curling. But none of them mentioned Hemlock Trail. And that's what finally pushed me toward the computer. I booted up the old laptop I used mostly for Zoom calls and grocery coupons. My hands trembled as I typed the address listed on the mortgage documents, 4726 Hemlock Trail, Charlottesville. Even before the page loaded, I knew what I'd find. It wasn't the number or street that rang familiar, it was the rhythm of it. I'd seen it somewhere, heard it in passing. And there it was at the top of the search results. Zillow, Realtor.com. A dozen real estate listings, some with videos all showcasing the same property. White brick wide porch, black shutters, manicured lawn. A luxury home with oversized windows and a backyard built for hosting. My heart sank before my brain caught up. Savannah. It was the house she had posted online 3 months ago. Grinning on the front steps in a silk blouse and pencil skirt, holding a glass of rosé and captioning it, Manifested. Earned. Home sweet home. I remembered scrolling past it and thinking maybe she'd finally landed that big client she always bragged about. That she and Landon had somehow pulled through the tough year. They'd been struggling. She mentioned something vague about pivoting the business, about reinvesting into the brand. But I never asked. Savannah always made things sound complicated on purpose, like you were dumb if you didn't get it. She never told me she bought a house. She never said it was under my name. I stared at the screen, my breath shallow. Photo after photo cycled through like a taunt. Open concept kitchen with marble counters, vaulted ceilings, a walk-in closet the size of my guest bedroom, a soaking tub set under a skylight. And suddenly, I saw it. Not just the house, but my name plastered onto this thing like a silent sacrifice. A silent cost. My eyes landed on the last sold data at the bottom of the page, 6 months ago, right when the mortgage was supposedly taken out. I clicked into the county's public record system and searched the parcel ID. It pulled up a deed of trust electronically signed. Borrower Marlene Whitaker. There it was again, the forged signature, that cruel impersonation. I sat back trying to make sense of it. Of what kind of person did this? Of why? But the why didn't matter right now. What mattered was that someone my sister had pretended to be me. She'd taken the very foundation of who I was, my name, my financial standing, my reputation, and used it as scaffolding for her fantasy. She built a dream on the bones of my reality. My head throbbed. I turned off the computer, closed the lid slowly, like it was a door I couldn't slam yet. I stood in the center of my quiet house, arms folded tightly against my chest. Outside, the wind moved through the maple trees like whispers. I imagined Savannah curled up on a designer couch in her new home, maybe sipping wine, maybe scrolling past memes, maybe laughing. I wondered if she knew I'd found out. If she ever thought I would. If she ever imagined I'd do something about it. But something inside me had cracked wide open. Not in panic, not in fear, in clarity. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't some technical glitch the bank would eventually fix. It was theft. And this time, I wasn't going to be the sister who kept quiet. When I think back to our childhood, it's always Savannah's laughter that I hear first. She had that kind of energy, the kind that pulled every spotlight in the room toward her. She was beautiful even as a child, with wild auburn curls and a crooked grin that made adults melt and teachers forget to discipline her. Savannah knew how to get what she wanted, not because she asked, but because she made you want to give it to her. She was 5 years younger than me, and yet from the time she could string sentences together, she was already the more dominant force in the house. My parents adored her. That's not to say they didn't love me, but they adored her. There's a difference. I was the one who cleaned up our shared room, while Savannah scattered glitter and clothes across every surface. I was the one who remembered Mom's grocery list, while Savannah danced barefoot through the aisles, sneaking candy bars into the cart. And when something broke or went missing or turned up damaged, it was always me who got the look. The sigh. The question, Marlene, why didn't you say something? Because saying something would have made me the bad guy. Because keeping order was always easier than starting a war. Savannah never liked rules. She found ways around them with a kind of charming manipulation that I'll admit was impressive in retrospect. In high school, she once convinced an entire panel of teachers to let her submit a video presentation in place of an essay. She got an A. I did the same thing 2 years earlier and was told I wasn't taking the assignment seriously. That was our dynamic. She was chaos wrapped in velvet. I was the one who swept the floors afterward. Mom used to say, "You girls balance each other. Savannah brings the spark. Marlene keeps the flame steady." I don't think she realized what she was admitting, that I was expected to contain Savannah's wildfire, no matter how high it raged. I played my part, quietly, consistently. I didn't mind. Not really. Until now. It's funny how people think simplicity equals sadness. I've always been drawn to quiet things, the smell of clean laundry drying on a line, the way a cat settles into the crook of your knee without asking permission, the soft rhythm of pen on paper. I find peace in what's predictable. I find meaning in repetition. I don't chase thrills. I plant things and wait for them to grow. Savannah never understood that. She used to tease me lovingly. I think about how I still used a physical planner and kept jars of dry lentils labeled by year. "You could make Pinterest jealous," she once said, taking a picture of my spice rack. "You're like an old librarian who never got invited to prom." I laughed, but it stayed with me. That's how she saw me, as someone who settled, as someone who accepted less. But she was wrong. I didn't settle. I chose it. My apartment wasn't flashy, but it was mine. The mismatched curtains, the second-hand sofa, the tiny herb garden on my windowsill. I built that world one small decision at a time. Each object had a story. Each corner was curated with care. And more than that, there was no debt, no noise, no facade. But to Savannah, value only existed in what could be shown off. Luxury wasn't just her goal, it was her personality. She used phrases like return on investment and elevated lifestyle in casual conversation, like we were both contestants in some silent competition I never signed up for. The older we got, the wider the gap between us became. She'd arrive to family brunches in designer heels, always late, always glowing with some new achievement. I'd be there early with a homemade quiche and lemon napkins folded just so. And maybe that's what bothered her, that I never envied her, that I never asked how she managed her life or what secrets she used to climb so high. I didn't want her world, and maybe deep down she hated that. I think some people mistake contentment for judgment. But the truth is, I wasn't judging Savannah. I just didn't want to become her. It was a Sunday early spring, just a few weeks before everything unraveled. We were gathered at my parents' house for one of our traditional dinners, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans with just enough crunch. The kind of meal that tasted the same in 1998 as it did now. Comfort on a plate. Savannah breezed in late as usual, smelling like expensive perfume and citrus shampoo. She kissed Mom on the cheek, gave Dad a too loud compliment about the wine, and flopped down beside me like we were still kids sharing a couch. Her nails were fresh, gel, nude with gold flecks. She held her wine glass like a prop, fingers spread just wide enough to show off the ring Landon had upgraded for their 10-year anniversary. "So," she said, drawing out the word like a singer holding a note. We finally closed on the place. I blinked. "You bought a house," she hummed, grinning. "Charlottesville, Hemlock Trail. It's divine." My stomach clenched. That name, Hemlock Trail. She went on describing the square footage, the hardwood floors, the wraparound porch just begging for a swing. Her voice was full of delight, but her eyes, when they landed on me, held something sharper. "You'd love it, Marlene. So peaceful. Very you, but elevated." That was how she said it. Like I was a base model she'd built upon. Dad beamed. Mom clapped her hands. Jonah raised an eyebrow. And I smiled. I nodded. I asked polite questions. I pretended not to notice the tension tucked beneath her compliments, but inside, something flickered. A shadow of unease. She never mentioned applying for a loan. Never said a word about financing. Landon had supposedly left his company 6 months ago, and she'd complained more than once that the market was brutal. So how did she afford it, I almost asked. But I didn't, Because that's what I'd always done with Savannah. I let her speak. I let her shine. I let her build her castles even when I suspected they sat on sand. But that night, as I drove home with the windows down and the air turning colder, Hemlock Trail repeated in my mind like a warning. I didn't know why yet, but part of me already knew. Something wasn't right, and I was about to find out just how wrong it really was. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I didn't eat, I didn't shower. I just got dressed, grabbed my purse, and started driving. Charlottesville was an hour and 40 minutes away depending on traffic. I don't remember much about the road, just the hum of the engine, the steady rhythm of white lines flickering beneath my tires. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't make phone calls. I drove in silence the way you do when you're heading somewhere you already know will change everything. When I reached Hemlock Trail, I parked 2 houses down. I didn't want to be seen. It was real. The house was real. There it stood bold and smug in the morning light. White brick facade, dark shutters front porch, with 2 wicker chairs and a hanging fern that looked like it came straight from a magazine cover. A ceramic sign hung from a metal hook on the porch beam, the Parkers. Est 2012, Parkers. Savannah and Landon's last name. It hit me then not just that they'd stolen my name, but that they'd engraved their own on top of it. Claimed the house publicly, welcomed neighbors, put their story on display like a victory. There was a shiny black SUV in the driveway, her car. The same one she'd once joked was too good for Target parking lots. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, maybe more, watching, waiting. Through the open blinds of the front window, I caught a glimpse of Savannah walking by with a coffee mug in her hand. She looked relaxed, hair tied up in a silk scarf, wearing one of those matching lounge sets she always said made her feel rich before 9 a.m. She looked happy, not guilty, not worried. Not like someone who had stolen $823,000 under someone else's name. I didn't knock, I didn't call. I drove away slowly, shaking from the inside out. And then I got to work. My first stop was a local notary public, a small office tucked beside a UPS store in a shopping plaza off Route 29. I brought a printed copy of the mortgage application, the one with my signature on every page. I also brought my passport and 2 original documents I'd signed over the last year for comparison. I asked the notary, an older man named Lionel, with kind eyes, if he could verify whether the signatures were consistent. He took his time. He looked over each form with a magnifier, studying the pressure points, the flow, the rhythm of the pen. "Ma'am," he said finally, "this doesn't look like the same hand. Whoever did this was copying your style, but not very naturally. You see this hesitation here?" He pointed to the curve of the M on the mortgage. That's someone trying to mimic, not someone writing as themselves. I thanked him, paid in cash. Then I called a private investigator. It's not something I ever imagined myself doing. I didn't even know where to begin. But I searched online for Financial Fraud Investigator Virginia, and a name popped up with dozens of solid reviews. Raymond Vale. Raymond picked up on the second ring. His voice was calm, no nonsense. I told him I believed my identity had been used to purchase a home fraudulently by a family member. He didn't ask which one. He just said, "Can you meet this afternoon by 3 p.m.? I was sitting in a small office above a law firm with a man who looked like he had read every fine print paragraph ever written. I handed him the documents. He reviewed them like a surgeon preparing for a complicated procedure, carefully, silently, thoroughly. "This isn't amateur work," he said after a while. "Whoever did this had access. Real access. They knew your income. They had your documents, your social security number, your signature." He looked up at me. It was someone close. I nodded. My throat was dry. "Can you trace it?" I asked. He nodded. "We'll start with the mortgage IP, the email domain, and the attached phone number. If there's a pattern, we'll find it." He told me to give him a week. As I walked back to my car, I felt something settle in my chest. Not peace, not yet, but a steady resolve. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining this. And if Savannah thought I'd never take it this far, She was about to learn just how wrong she was. 5 days later, Raymond called. His tone was flat professional. He didn't build up to the results or ease into them with disclaimers. He didn't need to. The truth was what I hired him for, even if I already knew it in my gut. "I've confirmed everything you suspected," he said. The mortgage application was submitted online, originating from an IP address assigned to a commercial lease registered under Whitaker & Copro Realty, your sister's company. The application was completed using a Gmail address that differs from yours by 3 characters. Instead of Marlene Whittaker 1970, it's Marlene Whittaker 170. Close enough to pass casual inspection. I didn't say anything. I just listened, my hand gripping the phone a little tighter with every word. "There's more," he added. "Attached to the application is a scanned copy of a driver's license. Yours, same number, same photo. But the scan metadata shows it was uploaded from an iPhone registered to Landon Parker." I stood at the kitchen sink, staring at the faucet like it could explain what none of this could. Savannah didn't just use my name. She used my ID, my documents, my story. And she hadn't done it alone. Raymond continued. "Whoever planned this did it carefully. They inflated your income just enough to get approval, but not enough to trigger red flags. They listed your employer correctly, but used a different HR contact number, which appears to be a burner line. And they submitted tax returns pulled from what looks like a 2021 PDF, possibly from your email or hard drive. How would they have that, I asked, though I already knew. If your sister ever used your computer, or if she had access to your home office, your email, a shared password even once." My stomach turned. Savannah had visited me the previous spring. She'd stayed for the weekend when Landon was away on a business retreat. I remembered her borrowing my laptop to check her inbox. I'd thought nothing of it. We were sisters. I let her in. Literally, figuratively, legally. "I'll put together a full dossier," Raymond said. "I recommend you take it to the police. This isn't just identity theft. It's a layered fraud operation. If she'd defaulted longer, your credit would have collapsed entirely. Bankruptcy proceedings were likely next." I thanked him. I think I did. I can't remember how the call ended. I sank into the kitchen chair and stared at the wall. I wanted to feel anger, but all I felt was grief. Grief for something no one else would see as dead, the quiet assumption that my family would never weaponize what they knew about me. That no matter how different Savannah and I were, no matter how much tension brewed beneath the surface, there were lines she would never cross. I was wrong. She didn't just cross them. She paved a road over them and invited her husband to help. I opened my laptop and logged into my credit report. It was worse than I thought. There were 3 new credit cards in my name, one at a luxury department store I'd never been inside, another with a limit of $30,000, and one linked to a boutique travel agency, all maxed out. There was also a home equity line of credit drawn down to its final 1,000. It felt like suffocating in slow motion, like watching your own house burn down while you're still standing inside it. I clicked through the charges: spa packages in Palm Beach, furniture invoices from high-end showrooms, payments made to a company that specialized in designer renovations. Savannah had redecorated her house with my credit, lived lavishly, proudly, publicly, all under a name she had no right to touch. And what broke me wasn't the money. It wasn't even the potential legal mess. It was knowing that she must have assumed I'd never find out. Or worse, that if I did, I wouldn't fight. That I'd do what I always did. Stay quiet. Let it slide. Absorb the blow like a good daughter, a good sister, a good woman. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I opened a blank document and started typing. Every date, every call, every detail from Raymond's report. Not because I needed it right that second, but because I knew what came next. I was going to the police, not to seek revenge, but to reclaim my name. And this time, I wouldn't be the one carrying the weight of someone else's damage. I used to think identity theft was just numbers on paper, data breaches, credit card fraud. Things that happened in the abstract, something you could clean up with a few phone calls and a police report. But this was different. This wasn't just about stolen credit or a forged signature. This was about my name, my history, my trust. It was about someone reaching into the quiet, curated life I had spent decades building and pulling it apart like it meant nothing. That night, I didn't sleep. I moved from room to room in my little house, trying to decide what to do next. I touched things, books, a teacup, my grandmother's quilt, as if to confirm they were still mine, still real. And even though I knew the walls around me were solid, I felt suddenly unmoored, as though the floor could drop away at any moment. Around 9 a.m. the next morning, I drove to my parents' house. I hadn't planned it. I just ended up there. Their neighborhood hadn't changed much in the last 30 years. Same old trees leaning over the street, same crack in the driveway, from the time Savannah backed Dad's car into the garage pillar and blamed it on the dog. I parked but didn't get out right away. Inside, I knew Mom would be making tea or watching her daytime programs. Dad would be in his den, reading the paper in his recliner. And I would be sitting on their couch, trying to find the words. I rang the doorbell. My mother answered her smile, warming briefly, before she saw my face. "Everything all right, honey? I just needed to stop by," I said. "Didn't sleep much." She ushered me in, poured tea, made small talk about the neighborhood and the weather. I nodded, murmured responses, waiting for the moment, but it didn't come. I looked around the room where Savannah and I had opened Christmas presents as kids, where we'd fought over the last piece of pie, where she cried the night Landon proposed. I couldn't bring myself to speak. Not yet, not here. I left after 20 minutes claiming I had errands to run. Back home, I sat at my desk and stared at the blinking cursor on my computer screen. I opened a new document and titled it, "In Case I Forget." It wasn't for court, not for lawyers, not even for the police. It was for me. To remember that I hadn't imagined it all, that it had happened, that I wasn't being dramatic or paranoid or too sensitive, three things women are taught to believe about themselves when we point at injustice and say, "This hurts." So I wrote about the phone call from Eastwood Financial. I wrote about the application IP address, the fake email, the photo of my license, the credit cards, the lies, the showroom furniture, the renovations, the soft closing drawers, and hand-stitched linen. I wrote about the spring weekend when Savannah borrowed my laptop and made omelets like she was playing house laughing while cracking eggs, asking if I had a garlic press. I wrote about how she must have planned it, or at least fantasized about it long before I noticed anything was missing. When I finished, I printed it. Not for security, just for tangibility. I folded it and placed it in the back of my journal where I kept letters from students and notes from friends. Then I picked up the phone. I dialed the non-emergency line for the Richmond Police Department. A woman answered asking how she could help. "My name is Marlene Whitaker," I said. "I need to report identity theft, and I believe I know who did it." There was a pause. Not of suspicion, just surprise. Most people, I imagine, report strangers, not sisters. She transferred me to a detective. I gave my statements step by step, careful not to let emotion slip too far into my voice. But even as I listed the evidence, my hands trembled. Not from fear, from the weight of what I was doing. Reporting Savannah wasn't just drawing a legal line. It was cutting the last thread of a bond I'd spent my life preserving. After the call, I sat in silence. Then I reached for my journal again and wrote 4 words at the top of a new page. "Today, I chose truth." Detective Camille Price didn't look like the kind of woman who needed to raise her voice to be heard. When I first met her at the Richmond precinct, she greeted me with a calm nod, a firm handshake, and eyes that missed nothing. She didn't offer sympathy. She offered clarity. She took my printed documents, examined the evidence I had collected so far, and said, "Let me dig. Give me a week." She took down every detail, the forged mortgage documents, the mismatched signature curves, the IP address that traced back to Savannah's former real estate office. I handed over the list of questionable credit inquiries and copies of the credit card statements I had pulled. Camille didn't flinch once. She just kept writing, and then she got to work. It was 10 days later when she called me. "We need to meet," she said. "There's more." I drove to the station with my stomach in knots. I kept thinking she might say it was a misunderstanding. that there was someone else, that Savannah's name was just a coincidence. But Camille had no such illusions to offer. She laid out the findings like a surgeon describing a diagnosis, her tone clinical but not cold. There are 2 more credit lines opened under your name, she began, one of which was used to purchase furniture from an interior design firm based out of Charlottesville. That's nearly $40,000. I blinked. I never saw a bill. They were sent to a P.O. box registered to a shell company. We traced the ownership of that company back to Landon Whitaker, my sister's husband, the same man who once told me I was too old-fashioned for using checks, Camille continued. We also found a secondary savings account opened under your social security number, but with a slightly different spelling of your middle name. Funds were moved from that account directly into Landon and Savannah's joint account over the last 4 months. How much? About $85,000, in small increments, carefully spaced out. It was methodical, calculated, not an accident, not an impulse, premeditated. There's more, she said, and this time her voice softened. We pulled emails from the mortgage broker. One of the addresses used to communicate about the loan documents looked like yours, but when we examined the domain, it had 1 extra character. It was a fake account. Savannah had created a near duplicate of my email, enough to fool someone glancing quickly. I pressed my hand to my mouth. I felt nauseous. And then she said the thing that turned my blood cold. We have evidence that they were preparing to file bankruptcy under your name, using the address of the Hemlock Trail house, the mortgage you never signed, and the credit lines you didn't open. That was their plan B, if things went south. My knees weakened. I sat down hard. I imagined it me one morning getting served with a bankruptcy notice. My credit destroyed. My reputation in ruins. People whispering behind my back at school. Poor Marlene. Can't manage her money. Didn't see it coming. They weren't just stealing from me. They were preparing to bury me. I looked at Camille. Will they go to jail if we move forward with the charges? Yes. This isn't petty fraud. This is a coordinated financial crime. For a long time, I didn't say anything. I was trying to process what all this meant. What it said about my sister, about my own blind spots. And then I asked her a question I hadn't planned on asking. Do they do this often, families? I mean, people stealing from their own. Camille tilted her head slightly, more than you'd think, especially when one member plays it quiet for too long. Her words hit me like a bell. I had been quiet for too long. I had excused too much. I had let things slide, told myself it wasn't worth the fight. That being the calm one was a kind of strength. But there's a difference between peacekeeping and self-erasure, between being gracious and being a doormat. I thanked Camille and walked to my car, but I didn't drive home. Instead, I sat in the driver's seat watching the rain blur the windshield. And I started making a plan, not just for legal recourse, but for telling the truth, publicly, to my family. No more secrets, no more protection. If Savannah was willing to write me into a financial grave, then the least I could do was make sure she knew I'd crawled out of it, and that I wasn't afraid of her anymore. I used to be the kind of woman who threw away receipts, who deleted voicemails without listening twice, who believed that when people lied, the truth would reveal itself naturally, like weeds pushing through cracks in the sidewalk. Not anymore. The moment I left Detective Camille Price's office, I knew I had to change. Not just how I thought about my sister, but how I existed in my own life. So I started small. I bought a new external hard drive, something sturdy, password protected. I created folders, one labeled mortgage, another credit cards, another email spoof. Every piece of evidence Camille had found, I asked her for a copy. I scanned everything into PDFs. I printed hard copies, filed them by date, stored them in a fireproof box I bought that very same afternoon. I became the kind of woman who carried a small digital voice recorder in her purse, not to catch people necessarily, but to protect myself. The first recording happened by accident. Savannah called me 2 nights later at 10:17 p.m. Her name flashed across my phone and my stomach turned. I picked up anyway. "Hey Marlene," she said, all breathy and casual, like nothing had happened. I just wanted to check in. Everything okay? I didn't answer immediately. Then I said, "What would make you think it isn't?" She laughed. A short, nervous sound. "Oh, family stuff. Mom said you seemed tense at dinner." I clicked the recorder button and set the phone on speaker. "I was tense," I said. Some things came up. "What kind of things?" "Financial things." Silence. Then she said, "Well, if you ever need help, Landon and I are happy to." I cut her off. "Are you?" She cleared her throat. "Are we what? Happy to help," I said. "Or happy to steal." And then I heard the catch in her breath. It was only half a second, but it was real. I pressed the recorder closer to the speaker. She recovered quickly. "Marlene, that's ridiculous." "What are you even talking about?" I didn't answer. I let the silence hang. She kept talking, rambling now. "I think you're stressed, that's all. Maybe you should see someone, talk to a counselor or something." A counselor. That was rich. I ended the call a few minutes later and saved the recording with the file name call. Fun. Savannah. Panic. After that, I became meticulous. I reviewed every email she'd ever sent me over the last year, ones I'd ignored or skimmed or deleted. I forwarded them to my new secure address. I ran headers on every message tracing metadata. There it was, plain as daylight. 2 messages that appeared to come from her personal Gmail, but had a different IP origin, a slightly altered domain. I took screenshots. I exported full emails to EML format. I saved them all. Then I turned to social media. Savannah was a serial oversharer. Instagram photos of her new granite countertops. A boomerang of Haley twirling in the foyer. A story of Landon sipping wine near their fireplace with the caption, "Dreams come true." I took stills of everything. The photo metadata showed timestamps, geolocation tags, dates that lined up perfectly with when the fraudulent funds had been transferred. I wasn't just building a case, I was reclaiming my voice. Each file I saved was a refusal to be erased. Each screenshot a record that I existed and that I remembered. I even called the furniture company that had fulfilled the design order on the new house. Posed as a curious neighbor, asked about the items delivered to Hemlock Trail. The rep was cheerful, clueless. "Oh, the Whitaker project." Yes, that was one of our biggest orders this season. Full Italian leather living set, 2 marble-top dining tables, custom wall art from a local artist. Gorgeous stuff. Gorgeous. Paid for in my name. I hung up and added that note to the interior design file. Sometimes I'd pause to look at what I'd become. A woman with color-coded folders, secure passwords, email logs, recorded calls. It wasn't who I'd been. But maybe it was who I needed to be now. Because the truth is, I wasn't just gathering evidence for court. I was documenting the dismantling of a lie. A lie that said I was too passive to notice, too naive to fight, too small to matter, no more. The old me would have swallowed her fury, dressed it in civility, waited for someone else to step in. But the woman I was becoming. She knew that justice wasn't polite, it was patient. And it kept receipts. Sunday dinners at my parents' house were sacred. A kind of unspoken contract between us, kept alive by ritual and habit. My mother made the same lemon chicken piccata she had for the last 20 years. My father uncorked a bottle of red from his basement stash, always declaring it well-aged even if it wasn't. Jonah brought his wife and son, arriving precisely at 5:55. And Savannah made an entrance late and glowing, bearing a box of overpriced eclairs or creme brulee from some boutique bakery she could barely pronounce. And me, I brought politeness. A casserole dish if I felt generous. And quiet if I didn't. But not tonight. I arrived on time, wore a navy blouse, simple jewelry, no makeup. I'd planned it that way, neutral, unreadable. I carried a leather folder tucked under my arm. The weight of it felt different now. Not just paper, but purpose. Savannah and Landon arrived last, as expected. She wore a white cashmere sweater and kissed both of our parents on the cheek. Landon looked like he always did, clean-shaven, smug, detached, scrolling his phone like he had better places to be. The meal started like clockwork. Small talk, work updates. Jonah's son mentioning soccer tryouts. My father asking about the neighbor's new roof. I smiled, nodded, chewed, pretended. Then Savannah leaned in to pour herself another glass of wine. Her diamond bracelet clinked against the crystal stem. So she said, drawing the word out like a slow ribbon. I finally finished furnishing the house. It looks like a restoration hardware catalog. Honestly, Mar, you should come see it sometime. Mar. That nickname. I hadn't heard it since we were teenagers. She only used it when she wanted to sound affectionate or disarming. I placed my fork down, folded my napkin slowly, and slid the folder onto the table. Nobody moved. I looked at my mother first. I need you all to look at something. She blinked, her mouth half open in surprise. My father paused mid-sip. Jonah's brow furrowed immediately. What is this? Savannah asked, already suspicious. I flipped the folder open, spread the pages out like a dealer at a blackjack table. Police report, forensic handwriting analysis, screenshots, transaction logs, IP trace reports. It's a file I submitted to the police, I said, last week. The silence that followed was not empty. It was thick. It buzzed. Savannah reached for one of the papers. Her fingers trembled slightly before she snatched them back. What are you accusing me of? I looked directly at her. You know exactly what this is. Landon's chair scraped backward. Let's not do this here, he said. This is a family dinner. Yes, Jonah cut in, voice sharp. And this is a family matter. I turned to my parents. Savannah took out a mortgage in my name. She used my social security number. She faked my signature. Then she opened credit cards, spent thousands on furniture and travel. And when they couldn't keep up, she and Landon started preparing to file bankruptcy under my name. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her chest. My father said nothing, just stared at the documents, unblinking. Savannah's face contorted. That's a lie. This is insane, Marlene. You've clearly misunderstood something. I didn't misunderstand a thing, I said calmly. The IP address used to file the mortgage belongs to your former office. Your name appears as co-signer on the second application. There are email trails, transaction receipts, call recordings. Landon looked at her, the first flicker of genuine panic in his eyes. My mother finally found her voice. Marlene, please. Do we have to do this like this in front of everyone? I stared at her. Do you remember when Savannah took Grandma's inheritance and said it was a mix-up with the bank? You asked me to stay quiet then too. And I did. I've done it all my life. Savannah's jaw clenched. That was years ago. We were young. No, I said. We were old enough to know better. Jonah stood up. I believe her, he said. You've always played fast and loose, Savannah. But this is fraud. The table fractured after that. Voices rose, chairs scraped. Savannah shouted something about being scapegoated. Landon accused me of jealousy. My mother sobbed quietly. My father still hadn't spoken. And I gathered my papers, slid them back into the folder, and stood. I didn't come here to argue. I came to inform. Then I walked out, not because I wanted to leave, but because for once I was choosing myself. Savannah's denial came swiftly like a reflex, loud, indignant, and practiced. This is absurd. You think I'd do that to you? You think I'd steal your name, your identity, Marlene? I'm your sister. I didn't flinch. She stood, hands gripping the edge of the table as if she could will it to steady her unraveling world. Her voice pitched upward, desperation mingled with outrage. Do you know what you're accusing me of? This isn't just some mistake you're calling me a criminal. I kept my eyes on her. I'm not calling you anything. I'm stating what I know to be true. What the evidence proves. Savannah's voice cracked. I didn't mean to. The room froze. There it was, the first crack in her denial. Jonah inhaled sharply. My father looked up from his silence. My mother's hands twisted in her lap. Savannah pressed her palms to her temples. We were drowning, okay? Landon's business went under. We had credit card debt. Haley's school tuition, the mortgage on the condo in Atlanta, everything was falling apart. I panicked. I thought maybe I could get us through it. Her voice softened almost into a plea. You were always so Put together, Marlene. You don't spend your money. You don't need much. I thought you wouldn't notice, or if you did, we'd fix it before it got out of hand. I didn't expect the payments to default so fast, I raised a hand. You forged my name, Savannah. You stole from me. This isn't forgetting to return a sweater. This is federal fraud. She blinked back tears now. But I'm your sister. You keep saying that like it should mean something. That stung her. She turned toward my parents' voice trembling. Mom, Dad, please tell her. This can't go any further. We can fix this. We can sell the house. We'll pay her back. Just don't let her go to the police. Jonah scoffed. It's already with the police. Savannah's head snapped toward him. Stay out of this. He stepped forward. You made it my business the moment you dragged this family into it. Landon, who had been eerily quiet, stood up. I'm not going to sit here and watch this circus. Savannah's eyes widened. Landon, I told you this would catch up to us. I told you to leave her name out of it. You didn't listen. He looked at me, then Jonah. I'm not defending it. But I didn't sign anything. That's her signature on those forms. And with that, he walked out. Savannah staggered backward into her chair. She looked smaller now, unmasked and alone. Remember the inheritance, I said quietly. Grandma's money. Her face went blank. You said it got tied up in the wrong account. That you'd handle it. Mom and Dad begged me not to make a scene, and I didn't. I thought maybe it was an accident. That maybe I was being dramatic. I leaned closer. But you've always known how to take without asking, and you've always counted on my silence. This time, she didn't reply. Because there was nothing left to say. Jonah stood taller than I'd ever seen him, his voice steady. You're not alone this time, Marlene. It was strange how quickly the room divided, as if all the invisible lines we'd ignored for decades between truth and loyalty, silence and justice suddenly lit up in neon. My mother broke first. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she looked from Savannah to me. You two were supposed to take care of each other. We did, I said, until only one of us kept doing the taking. My father's expression hardened. Is it true? He asked Savannah, not loud, but deadly quiet. She said nothing. He looked away. Unbelievable. The pain on my mother's face twisted into something worse, shame. We should have seen this. We let things slide because she was struggling. We didn't want to believe you wanted peace, I said, even if it came at the cost of justice. Jonah nodded. We all did. Savannah was still seated, her fingers twitching against her knees. She looked at each of us as if waiting for anyone to rescue her. But no one moved. This wasn't just a reckoning for her. It was one for all of us. I realized then for the first time that our family had always been more fragile than we admitted. Held together not by trust, but by roles we performed out of obligation. Savannah, the adored but chaotic spark. Jonah, the stable son. Me, the quiet one, the buffer, the fixer. The one who swallowed hurt to preserve peace. But the roles didn't fit anymore. My mother turned to me, her voice hoarse. What will happen now? She's already been reported, I said. The investigation's underway. And us, she whispered. I shrugged gently. That's not up to me. Jonah reached for my hand under the table. I let him. Because for once someone was reaching back. I left without raising my voice. No slamming doors, no dramatic exits. Just a quiet retrieval of my coat, and the leather folder now slightly smudged from hands and tears. Savannah didn't try to stop me. My mother sobbed into a napkin. My father stared out the window like he was waiting for the dark to swallow him whole. Jonah walked me out. You okay? He asked. I nodded. Not really, but I'm getting there. We stood beside my car for a minute, the cold evening air wrapping around us. Thank you, I said. You shouldn't have had to go through this alone. I know. He hesitated, then said, I always thought you were the strongest one in the room. I just didn't realize it until now. I smiled, then sad, but real. Maybe that's because I never asked anyone to notice. He hugged me, the kind of hug that says I see you now. When I got home that night, I changed into pajamas, made a cup of tea I never drank, and sat at my desk. I opened my journal. and wrote one line. The truth was my final goodbye to the sister who used to exist. Not Savannah, the woman who forged my name and stole my life, but the little girl I once shared a bedroom with, who used to sneak extra cookies into my backpack, who cried the day I left for college, who once asked if we could live next door to each other when we grew up. That girl was gone, and maybe, just maybe, so was I, or at least the version of me who tolerated betrayal for the sake of appearances, who swallowed her own anger to preserve someone else's illusion. That woman had finally laid down her silence, and in its place something unshakable was starting to rise. Savannah was arrested on a Tuesday morning, the kind of crisp Virginia morning where the dew still clings to your car windows and the sun rises reluctantly behind a sheet of gray. I wasn't there when it happened. I didn't need to be. It was all over the town by noon. Charlottesville isn't large. Word moves quickly, especially when it's about the downfall of someone like Savannah. The headlines were merciless: local woman arrested in identity fraud scheme involving sister. The local radio station even mispronounced my name, but it didn't matter. Everyone knew. That week I stopped going to my favorite coffee shop. The barista I'd smiled at for 3 years now gave me the kind of tight, pitying glance I couldn't stand. I ordered my groceries online, let the dog out through the back instead of going on our morning walks. Even my yoga instructor sent me a polite email saying she'd refund my class credits if I needed space. My parents didn't call. Not the first day, not the second. On Friday, an envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a handwritten note, familiar handwriting, curved and hesitant. Please don't press charges. She's your sister. She just lost her way. We'll fix this as a family. We can sell the house, move. Just don't ruin her life forever. There was no signature. But I didn't need one. It was my mother. Not a word about my name being dragged through court records. Not a single question about how I was holding up. Only a plea, silent and cowardly, asking me to protect the very person who had nearly destroyed me. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. I didn't burn it. I wanted to remember what silence looks like when it's dressed up as peace. The surprising thing wasn't how many people turned away. It was how many stepped forward. I received the first letter a week after the arrest. A woman from Richmond. She'd seen my story online and wrote in shaky blue ink about how her brother had used her credit to fuel his gambling habit. She never told anyone, said she felt ashamed, as if the crime had tainted her instead of him. Then came an email from a teacher in Minnesota, a direct message from a woman in Florida, messages from strangers, some anonymous sharing stories that mirrored mine in painful detail. Every time I read one, I felt a part of myself stitching back together, not in the way that says I'm over this, but in the way that says I'm not alone. Eventually, I joined a virtual support group for identity theft victims. We met every Wednesday night, little squares of faces on a screen sharing grief that was both oddly specific and universally wounding. One woman had her tax return stolen. Another lost her job after her twin sister drained her bank account. When it was my turn to speak, I told them the truth. Not just the details, but the part that still ached. How do you explain to people that the worst betrayal came not from a stranger, but from someone you once braided hair with? Someone whose tears you wiped at age 7, who shared your bed when storms frightened her. They understood. No one told me to forgive. No one offered empty advice about time healing wounds. They just listened. And in that quiet, I found a strange sort of power, not in moving on, but in standing still facing the wreckage and choosing to exist anyway. Haley showed up one afternoon without warning. I opened the front door to find her standing on my porch in a green hoodie 3 sizes too big. Her eyes swollen and her lips pressed into a line so thin it almost disappeared. She didn't say hello. She just asked, "Can I come in?" I nodded and stepped aside. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Savannah once teased me about my mason jar herb garden. The same table where I'd written my first police statement. Haley looked older than 15. Not in her body, but in the way she sat, rigid and unsure, as if she wasn't sure if she belonged anywhere anymore. "I'm not here because my mom asked me to," she said. "She doesn't even know I came. I said nothing. She looked down at her hands. They talk about it at school. Some kids say my mom's a con artist. One boy asked if we lived in a stolen house. I winced. She looked up. I know what she did. And I'm not here to defend it. Her voice shook. I just want to know, do you still think of me as your niece? That question, it shattered something I didn't know I'd been holding together. I felt the tears before I even knew I was crying. I reached across the table and took her hand. Yes, Haley, I do. Always. Her shoulders collapsed in relief. The kind of release only a child can allow themselves in the presence of someone who truly sees them. She whispered, I don't know who to believe anymore, but I always believed you. I nodded. That's more than enough. For the first time since this all began, I let myself cry, not out of grief or rage or disbelief, but because in the middle of all the wreckage, something soft had survived. And I would protect it. I moved into my new apartment on a Tuesday, a different kind of Tuesday than the one when Savannah was arrested. This one was quieter, not in sound but in spirit. The silence didn't loom or suffocate. It settled like soft rain on a window pane. The place was smaller than the last. Just one bedroom, a kitchen that barely fit 2 people, and a balcony with chipped paint on the railing. But it was mine. The first thing I unpacked was the rosemary plant. It had barely survived the move, limp dry, holding on by threads. I trimmed the dead stems, gave it new soil, and placed it near the window where sunlight spilled in like forgiveness. Then I called a locksmith. He changed the deadbolt, added a sliding bar. A few hours later, a security technician came by and installed a system I'd never thought I needed. Motion sensors, keypads, a quiet, blinking red dot in the corner of the ceiling. For the first time in my life, I'd drawn a boundary, a literal one, and it felt good. Not because I was scared, but because I finally believed that my safety mattered, that my space was sacred. I brewed tea that night, chamomile and honey, and sat on the balcony with my feet tucked under a blanket. I didn't play music. I didn't check my phone. I just listened to the world without Savannah's chaos echoing in my ears. The rosemary plant, still fragile, swayed gently in the breeze beside me. We were both learning how to grow again. A few weeks later, I was invited to speak at a legal conference on identity theft and emotional recovery. It wasn't something I sought out. One of the women from my support group had recommended me. They need to hear from someone who's lived through it, she said. Not just lawyers in suits. I almost said no, but something inside me whispered that it was time. I stood behind the podium in a navy dress I hadn't worn in years. The microphone was too tall at first, and I had to adjust it with trembling hands. The room held about 60 people, attorneys, social workers, students, their faces open, expectant. I began not with facts, but with a question. How do you rebuild your life when your name has been used against you? They listened. I spoke about the calls from the bank, the quiet unraveling of my certainty, the long nights alone with legal documents and doubts, the difference between justice and peace. I did not cry, but others did. One woman in the front row dabbed her eyes with a hotel napkin. A young man near the back nodded through every sentence as if his bones understood what I was saying before his mind did. I ended with this: recovery isn't about becoming who you were. It's about becoming someone you can trust. The applause wasn't loud. It was steady, sustained, sincere. That night, I went back to my hotel room and stared at myself in the mirror longer than usual. Not to check my hair or makeup, just to look. There she was, Marlene, whole, real, unafraid to take up space. The letter arrived 3 months later, cream-colored envelope, familiar handwriting. For a moment, I didn't breathe. I considered not opening it, just tossing it into the drawer with the rest of the wreckage. But curiosity tugged harder than caution. It was a short letter, no apologies, no justifications, just 5 sentences. I know what I did. I know what it cost you. I stole your name, but worse, I stole your trust. You didn't deserve it. I hope you're finding peace. No signature, but again, I didn't need one. I read it twice, then a third time. There was no bitterness in me, no satisfaction either. Just a quiet ache like an old wound someone brushed by accident. I didn't write back, but I didn't destroy the letter either. Instead, I found a small wooden box in my closet, the kind with a little keyhole and a velvet lining inside. I placed the letter inside it, along with the photo of us as kids at the county fair, a broken necklace she once gave me, and a dried sprig of rosemary. I locked the box, not because I wanted to forget, but because remembering now had its place, a room with a door, and I held the key. I returned to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. The evening sun painted streaks of gold across the countertop. My rosemary plant had perked up green upright, quietly thriving. And so was I. I used to think of myself as a victim, a word I never said out loud, not even to myself, but one that lived in the mirror lurking behind every quiet nod, every time I let something slide in the name of keeping the peace. But that version of me is gone now. Not erased, not forgotten, but transformed. When I look back at the months that followed that call from the bank, I don't see a story about betrayal anymore. I see a timeline of choices mine. Hard, painful, and sometimes lonely ones, but choices all the same. I could have ignored the signs, could have folded into myself, and disappeared under the weight of shame and disbelief. Many do. I understand why, but I didn't. I chose to listen to the part of me that had always whispered for justice, the part that asked, what if your silence isn't protecting peace, but feeding a lie? It took time. It took tears, questions, setbacks, and long nights with documents and memories I didn't want to face. But I did face them. And in doing so, I discovered something bigger than the truth about Savannah. I discovered myself. I'm not someone who thrives on conflict. I never was. I believe in grace, in second chances. But grace isn't permission, and second chances must be earned. For too long, I confused love with tolerance. I thought loyalty meant absorbing the damage, holding still while the people I loved spun chaos around me. I thought being the good one meant swallowing every injustice with a smile. No more. Now I set boundaries. I say no when it needs to be said. I speak not to destroy, but to declare I exist. I matter. My name is not a tool for anyone else's dream. I am not a victim. I am someone who survived. Someone who told the truth even when no one wanted to hear it. Someone who stood alone at a dinner table filled with history and guilt and still stood tall. I may have lost a sister, but I found my voice, and that I will never trade again. Starting the blog wasn't part of some grand plan. It began with a blank screen and the thought, if I don't share this, who will? The first post was raw, clumsy even. Just a retelling of what happened. The mortgage, the police report, the Sunday dinner. I wrote it all in one sitting, hands, trembling, tea forgotten on the windowsill. I didn't promote it, didn't share it with friends, just posted it quietly and went to bed. When I woke up, there were 30 comments. A week later, there were over 1,000. People from all over wrote to me. Women, men, retirees, college students, single parents. Some had faced identity theft. Some had been betrayed by siblings. Others hadn't gone through anything similar at all, but said the story gave them language for the silent places in their own lives. One message stood out. It came from a woman in Oregon named Sheila. She wrote, I've been silent for 4 years. My brother stole from me too. I thought keeping the family together mattered more than justice. After reading your story, I called a lawyer. Another wrote, I read this aloud to my teenage daughter. We cried together. She told me she's proud. I finally told someone what happened to us. I wasn't a lawyer. I wasn't a therapist. I was just someone who decided to stop pretending everything was okay. And somehow, that was enough. Enough to remind others they weren't alone. Enough to start a conversation in homes that hadn't spoken truth in decades. Enough to give permission not to seek revenge, but to reclaim peace. The blog grew, not massive, not viral, but steady, honest. I didn't post every day just when I had something real to say. Sometimes it was a memory. Sometimes it was a tip about protecting your financial identity. And sometimes it was just a quote that had carried me through a hard week. It wasn't about the past anymore. It was about what we do after, how we rebuild, how we choose ourselves without apology. This morning, I woke up before the alarm. Sunlight poured through the curtain in that gentle way it does when autumn begins to arrive. The air was crisp, the kind that makes you want to wrap your hands around a warm mug and move slowly through the morning. I brewed tea chamomile again. Water boiled in my favorite kettle, the one with the chipped handle I still haven't replaced. I like it that way. Like me, it's imperfect, used, reliable. While the tea steeped, I checked on the rosemary. It's thriving now, green fragrant reaching toward the window as if it knows the worst is behind it. I snipped a small piece and laid it on the cutting board. A habit, a ritual, something steady in a world that still wobbles sometimes. Then I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and began to write. Today's post wasn't dramatic, just a few words about boundaries and how sometimes they're the most loving thing we can offer ourselves and others. As I typed, I felt calm. Not elation, not triumph, but peace. Not because life is perfect now, but because I am no longer hiding inside it. I've learned that silence can be soft but also suffocating, and that speaking up isn't always loud, it's just clear. I've learned that family is more than blood. Sometimes it's the people who hear your story and choose to stay, who send you letters, who tell you your courage made space for mine. I've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean reunion, it means release. And I've learned that peace does not come from avoiding pain, but from knowing you faced it and you're still here, still whole, still worthy. I sip my tea, the cup warm against my palms. Outside, the world stirs. But in this moment, everything is still. And I understand something I never did before. Peace doesn't come from quiet. It comes from knowing you did the right thing, even if doing the right thing makes the whole world go silent. Before we say goodbye, I want to leave you with this. Where are you watching from today? A quiet morning with tea in hand, or a sleepless night where stories like this whisper something you needed to hear? Wherever you are, I hope this story gave you space to breathe, to reflect, and maybe to believe again. If Marlene's journey moved you, please consider subscribing to our channel. Not just to hear more stories, but to join a space where truth is honored, where healing takes time, and where second chances are never out of reach. We read every comment with care. So if you're holding something in your heart, we invite you share it. You're not alone here. Thank you for spending your time with us. And if no one has told you lately, your voice matters. Your story matters. Sometimes peace isn't about silence. It's about finally saying what needed to be said. Take care of yourself. We'll see you in the next story.